Okay, let's start this off with a little word association game. If I say the name Chris Hadfield, what is the absolute first image that flashes into your brain? Be honest.
Oh, that's easy. It's the mustache. It has to be the mustache.
I mean, it's practically a structural engineering marvel in its own right. It's iconic.
It is a legendary piece of facial hair. I will absolutely give you that. But for me, and I'm guessing for a huge chunk of our listeners, the image is it's him floating. He's in that windowed cupola on the International Space Station, guitar in hand, just floating in zero-G, strumming David Bowie.
Space oddity.
Yeah. The singing astronaut, the guy who made space feel, well, accessible, human.
And that is a perfectly valid image. I mean, that video has been viewed something like 55 million times. It's not an exaggeration to say it fundamentally changed the public's relationship with space exploration.
Right.
But, and I want to be really emphatic about this, if you only know Chris Hadfield as the folk singing, tweeting, cool dad of the cosmos, you are missing about 90% of the actual story. That's exactly why I wanted to do this deep dive today. Because I started reading up on him, thinking, we just talk about social media and space, and I realized pretty quickly I had it all wrong. When you peel back that layer of viral fame, you don't just find a performer. You find one of the most highly decorated, technically elite, and frankly intense test pilots in aviation history.
It's a fascinating duality, isn't it? You have this incredibly approachable, friendly public figure, but his background is pure, steel-nerved, right stuff.
The right stuff, yeah.
We're talking about a Cold War interceptor pilot, a man who broke test flight records, and a master of crisis management who literally had to problem-solve his way out of being blinded while dangling outside a spacecraft.
Okay, that story about being blind in space, we are definitely going to get into that, because it is the stuff of nightmares.
It really is.
But I like your point about the duality. Our mission today is really to figure out how those two sides coexist. How did a corn farmer from Ontario become the bridge between the stoic, silent astronauts of the Apollo era and the hyper-connected, relatable era of modern science communication?
Well, I think the sources show it's a blueprint for success, really. But to understand the astronaut, you have to understand the pilot.
And to understand the pilot.
You have to understand the farmer.
So let's rewind. Let's set the scene. Because for a guy who ended up commanding the International Space Station, he started about as far away from the stars as you can physically get without being underground.
Literally grounded. He was born in 1959 in Sarnia, Ontario, but his formative years, the years that really shaped him, were spent on a corn farm in Milton.
A corn farm? You can't write a better backstory than that. It feels very Superman Smallville, Kansas, looking up at the sky.
It is classic.
Yeah.
And the pivotal moment, the spark, as he calls it, is one that he shares with millions of others of his generation.
The moon landing.
The moon landing. He was 9 years old. It's July 1969. He's with his family, crowded around a grainy black and white television set.
And Neil Armstrong taking that one giant leap.
Right. Now, here's the thing. Most 9-year-olds watched that, ran outside, played astronaut in the backyard for a week, and then moved on to wanting to be a fireman or a cowboy.
Sure.
Hadfield watched it, and something just clicked. He decided right then and there that he was going to be an astronaut. But you have to understand the context here.
Okay.
This wasn't an American kid with NASA in his backyard, with a clear path. He was a Canadian kid. And in 1969, Canada didn't even have an astronaut program.
So he was chasing a job that literally didn't exist for him.
Precisely. And this is where, if you're listening, this is where the learner in you should take notes. This was an accidental success. He didn't just get lucky. This was a deliberate, decades-long strategic campaign.
A plan.
A plan. He looked at what American astronauts did. They were pilots, they were engineers, they were physically fit, and he just started checking those boxes one by one.
Assuming that maybe, just maybe, the door would open eventually.
Exactly. He was preparing for an opportunity that might never come. That takes incredible focus.
And he started early. I was looking at his timeline, and the hustle is honestly exhausting just to read about. He joins the Royal Canadian Air Cadets. By age 15, he's earned a glider pilot scholarship.
15.
By 16, he's a powered pilot.
Think about that. He could fly a plane completely on his own before he could legally drive a car to the airport to get to that plane.
That's a level of focus I definitely didn't have at 16. I was trying to figure out how to get a date for prom.
Oh, most of us were. But that Air Cadet training is rigorous. It instills discipline, teamwork, leadership. But he knew, even then, that being a good pilot wasn't enough. In the modern era, astronauts are scientists. so he needed the technical chops.
Right, the engineering background.
So he goes to Royal Roads Military College, then the Royal Military College, graduating with a degree in mechanical engineering in 1982.
But he doesn't stop there.
No. Post-grad research at the University of Waterloo. Then a master's in aviation systems from the University of Tennessee.
Okay, listing the degrees is impressive, but I want to stop on the why. He wasn't just collecting diplomas to hang on the wall, right? There was a specific logic to what he was studying.
It was incredibly strategic. He wasn't just learning to fly the machine, he was learning the deep physics of why the machine flies. His thesis work, for example, which is usually pretty specialized, was on high angle of attack aerodynamics.
Okay, pause there.
Yeah.
Because I hear high angle of attack and I picture a plane diving steeply at the ground, like a Stuka bomber or something. But that's not what it means, is it?
No, that's a really common misconception. It's actually, in a way, the opposite.
Okay.
So imagine you're holding your hand out the window of a moving car.
Yep, done it 1,000 times.
If your hand is flat, parallel to the ground, the air flows over it smoothly, right? That's a low angle of attack.
Right, minimal resistance. It just cuts through the air.
Now slowly tilt the front of your hand up, facing into the wind. You feel that resistance building. The air pushes your hand up and back. That angle between where your hand is pointing and the direction the air is coming from, that's the angle of attack.
Okay, I'm with you. It's the angle of the wing versus the airflow.
Exactly. Now, if you tilt your hand up too steeply, what happens? Suddenly, the air can't flow smoothly over the back of your hand anymore. It gets turbulent, separates, it breaks away, and your hand just drops.
It stalls.
In a plane, that's a stall. The wing stops generating lift, and for a moment, it effectively becomes a brick.
And usually pilots try very, very hard not to do that, right? Falling out of the sky is generally considered a bad day at the office.
For a normal pilot, yes, a stall is an emergency. But Hadfield was training to be a test pilot. He was researching that exact chaotic edge, the specific moment where the physics break down. He wasn't just learning to fly, he was modeling the mathematics of failure.
Huh. Modeling the mathematics of failure.
And that mindset, studying the failure point so you understand the machine better than anyone else, that is the key to understanding his entire career, both as a pilot and an astronaut.
Which brings us to the first major phase of his professional life.
Yeah.
Before he was an astronaut, he was a warrior. I think people see the guitar and the friendly smile and forget that Chris Hadfield spent 25 years in the Canadian Armed Forces.
He was a fighter pilot, and not just any fighter pilot. He was flying CF-18 Hornets for NORAD in the 1980s.
For those who are a bit younger or just need a refresher, paint the picture of what NORAD duty meant during the Cold War. This wasn't just practice drills on a Sunday afternoon.
No, this was the SHIELD. NORAD is the North American Aerospace Defense Command. It's a joint U.S.-Canadian operation. His job was to sit in a cockpit on a cold runway in the Canadian North on what they called alert, ready to scramble at a moment's notice.
Do what?
To intercept Soviet aircraft that were constantly testing North American airspace, probing the defenses.
And there's a specific detail in his record that really drives home the reality of this. It's not abstract. Hadfield was the first CF-18 pilot to intercept a Soviet Tupolev Tu-95 Bear bomber in the Canadian Arctic.
That's a huge milestone, a big deal in that community.
But I want to stop on that word intercept, because we hear it and we think of video games. We think of locking missiles and explosions. What does an intercept actually look like in real life? Is he like waving at them?
It's a psychological game played at 30,000 feet at 500 miles an hour. You have to imagine the scene. You are in a tiny single-seat fighter jet flying over the frozen Arctic Ocean. It is desolate. There is no backup for hundreds of miles.
Just you and the ice.
And you pull up alongside this massive four-engine Soviet bomber, the Tu-95 Bear. It's a huge aircraft, a relic of the 50s, and it has these massive contra-rotating propellers that are so loud you can physically feel the vibration inside your own jet cockpit hundreds of feet away.
That is intimidating.
That's the entire point. Hadfield's job wasn't to shoot it down because that starts World War III. His job was to get close enough to fly wingtip to wingtip, take a photograph of the pilot to prove they were there, show them the missiles on his wings, and essentially communicate non-verbally, "We see you, we are ready, go home."
It requires just incredible precision. If you slip up and clip their wing.
It's an international incident, maybe a war. It's the ultimate test of flying skill and nerve. Hadfield talks about looking across that gap between the wings and seeing the Soviet pilot looking back at him.
Right.
Just two guys, highly trained professionals, effectively holding guns at each other in the total silence of the high Arctic. He said that experience realizing the enemy is just another professional doing a job really shaped his worldview later on.
It teaches you to stay calm when the stakes are literally nuclear.
Exactly.
So he's doing this high-stakes flying, but he still wants to push the envelope further. He's not satisfied. So he transitions into being a test pilot.
The elite of the elite.
He goes to the USAF Test Pilot School at Edwards Air Force Base.
Which is the holy grail. That's where Chuck Yeager was. That's where the legends are made. It's the place where they say you fly bleeding-edge technology.
And get this, in 1991, he was named the U.S. Navy Test Pilot of the Year.
As a Canadian.
A Canadian won the U.S. Navy Test Pilot of the Year award. That speaks volumes about his competence and how he was seen by his peers.
It really does. And he wasn't just flying standard jets. His logbook is incredible. He flew over 70 different types of aircraft. But one achievement stands out to me as an engineer.
Let me guess. The mouthful.
The mouthful. He piloted the first flight test of the National Aerospace Plane External Burning Hydrogen Propulsion Engine.
Okay, that is a lot of jargon. External burning hydrogen propulsion.
Yeah, break that down for us. What are we actually talking about here?
We're talking about the precursors to hypersonic flight, scramjets. In very simple terms, they were testing a radical engine concept where you burn fuel outside or at the rear of the aircraft's body to create thrust or modify the shock waves at extreme speeds.
That sounds incredibly volatile, burning hydrogen outside the plane. It's wildly experimental engine technology. You are strapping yourself to a machine that has never flown before to test an engine that might very well explode just to see if the math holds up in the real world.
That's the test pilot mindset right there.
He was pushing the absolute limits of what aerospace technology could do at the time.
So, by the early 90s, he has checked every single box. He's an engineer, a decorated fighter pilot, a top-tier test pilot with awards from a foreign military, and then, the door he'd been aiming at for 20 years, it finally cracks open.
1992, the Canadian Space Agency announces a call for new astronauts.
And the numbers are just staggering. 5,330 applicants.
And they picked four, just four. Hadfield was one of them.
I can't even imagine the pressure of that selection process. But he gets in, and this begins the second major phase of our story, the astronaut career. But I want to focus on something specific here. I think people assume astronauts just sit in the rocket and float around taking pictures. But Hadfield wasn't just a passenger.
No, not at all. He was a builder.
That's a great distinction.
His first mission was STS-74 in 1995. This was aboard the Space Shuttle Atlantis, and the destination was the Russian space station Mir.
And he was the first and only Canadian to ever board Mir.
Correct. But more importantly, he was a mission specialist. His main job on that flight was to operate the Canadarm in orbit. They weren't just visiting, they were attaching a 5-pren docking module to Mir.
So he was performing space construction?
Exactly. They were literally building out the space station. It showed that he could operate complex robotics in a high-pressure environment with international partners, Russians and Americans, working together right after the Cold War.
Which sets the stage perfectly for his second mission, STS-100 in 2001. This is where we get to the story that I think defines his entire philosophy.
Yeah.
He's on the shuttle Endeavour, helping install Canadarm2 on a brand new International Space Station. And to do that, he has to step outside for a spacewalk, his first extravehicular activity, or EVA.
First Canadian to ever float freely in space. Another historic moment.
So set the scene. He's outside, the Earth is scrolling by beneath him like this giant blue IMAX movie. He's working on the station, and then disaster strikes.
He goes blind.
Just like that, out of nowhere.
Pretty much. He had used an anti-fog solution on the inside of his visor before the spacewalk. It's basically a mild detergent, like a high-tech dish soap, used to polish the glass so your breath doesn't fog it up.
Okay, standard procedure.
Standard procedure. But a tiny bit of that residue hadn't been wiped off properly. As he's working and exerting himself, it gets into his eye.
Ouch. That stings on Earth. I can't imagine what that's like inside a sealed helmet.
It started to sting and his eye started to tear up. Now here is where the simple physics of space turns a minor annoyance into a life-threatening crisis.
Okay.
On Earth, if your eye tears up, what happens?
The tear runs down your cheek, gravity pulls it away.
Exactly. In space, there is no gravity to pull the tear down, so the water just accumulates. It sits on your eyeball. It forms a ball of liquid that gets bigger and bigger because of surface tension.
It's like wearing a fishbowl on your eye.
Worse. because the pain and the irritation makes his other eye start to tear up in sympathy. And because of the surface tension of water in zero-G, the liquid ball of tears actually bridged across the bridge of his nose and blinded his other eye.
Oh, no.
So now he is dangling in the vacuum of space, holding onto the side of the station with one hand, completely blind in both eyes, and in severe pain.
Most people would panic. I would absolutely panic. I'd be thrashing around, screaming on the comms to get me back inside.
And panic is death in space. If you thrash, you might tear your suit, you might kick a piece of critical equipment, you burn through your oxygen supply much faster. This is where all that test pilot training kicks in.
Okay.
He didn't scream. He calmly reported to Houston, "I can't see." Then he analyzed the situation. He couldn't wipe his eyes because he's inside a helmet. He couldn't go back in immediately without aborting the spacewalk and failing the mission and leaving the Canadarm2 in a precarious half-installed position.
So he's trapped. What did he do? What were his options?
He realized he had to get the liquid out. He looked at his resources. He couldn't touch his face. But he could control the air pressure inside his suit. So he made a decision. He opened the purge valve on his suit.
Wait, the purge valve?
Yeah.
Isn't that letting your precious, life-sustaining air out?
It is. He deliberately vented oxygen into the vacuum of space. He created a controlled leak in his own life support system.
That sounds absolutely insane. I can't see, so I'm going to drain my air supply.
It's the definition of a calculated risk. He knew how much oxygen reserve he had, down to the second. He was betting that the high-speed airflow generated by the escaping air would rush over his face and help evaporate or blow away the liquid ball that was blinding him.
He was trading oxygen for vision.
Exactly. It's MacGyver physics in a death zone.
And it worked.
And it worked. The flow of fresh, dry oxygen dried his tears enough for him to regain his sight. And here's the kicker. He didn't just survive. He didn't ask to go back in. She told Houston he was fine.
He stayed out there.
He stayed out there and finished the spacewalk. He completed the mission.
That is just. It's such a perfect example of what he talks about in his book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. He has this concept he calls the power of negative thinking.
Which sounds like a terrible self-help title, doesn't it? Usually we're told to visualize success.
Right. Picture yourself crossing the finish line. Picture the applause. Manifest your victory.
Hadfield argues that's useless, even dangerous, in a crisis. If you've only ever visualized success, the moment things start to go wrong, you freeze because you haven't rehearsed the failure.
Not prepared.
He visualizes the crash. He visualizes the fire. He visualizes the blindness. He sits in the simulator for thousands of hours and asks, what is the next thing that will kill me, and how do I kill it first?
So in that moment, while his eyes are burning, he wasn't panicking because he had effectively already lived that failure in his head. He'd already run the simulation.
Exactly. He had a mental checklist for it. Problem: vision obscured by liquid. Possible solutions. ABC. Let's try C purge valve. The anxiety we feel usually comes from not knowing what to do. If you have visualized the disaster and practiced the solution, you don't panic, you just work the problem.
That is a massive takeaway for anyone listening. Next time you have a big presentation or a job interview, don't just picture it going perfectly. Picture the projector breaking. Picture the toughest question they could ask. Picture forgetting your lines. Figure out what you do.
Then you can relax. Preparation creates calm. And that preparation wasn't just limited to space scenarios. We should briefly mention the Nemo 14 mission in 2010.
Right, the underwater lab. That's so cool.
NASA has this underwater research station called the Aquarius Laboratory off the coast of Florida. He lived down there for 14 days with a crew. It's an analog for space. It's an isolated, confined, dangerous environment where you have to rely on your life support and your team.
It's like a dress rehearsal.
It shows that his training never really stopped. He was always simulating, always preparing for the next big challenge.
Which leads us to the crown jewel of his career, the mission everyone knows him for, Expedition 35, from 2012 to 2013.
This was the big one. He launched on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft, TMA-07M, and in March of 2013, he took command of the International Space Station, the first Canadian commander in history.
And being commander isn't just a fancy title. He was responsible for a crew of 5 billions of dollars of technology and dozens of complex scientific experiments.
He's the CEO of a multinational corporation that happens to be moving at 17,500 miles per hour. He's overseeing research on how low gravity affects human biology, keeping the station systems running. It's a full-time, high-stress job.
But while he was doing all that incredibly serious work, he started doing something else, something that had never really been done effectively from space before. He started tweeting.
And this is where the paradigm shift happens. Before Hadfield, communication from space was very formal. It was sterile. It was press conferences with a time delay.
Right. It was scripted. Hello, Mr. President. Everything is nominal.
Right. It was distant. Hadfield just shared. He shared the mundane. But the secret sauce here, the thing that made it all work, wasn't just Chris. It was his son, Evan Hadfield.
The guy behind the guy on the ground.
Evan was on Earth managing the social media strategy, and he realized something the big space agencies didn't quite get at the time. The internet doesn't want press releases. It wants authenticity. It wants connection.
So what did he tell him?
He told his dad, "Don't just tell me what the experiment is. Show me how you trim your mustache in 0G. Show me how you sleep strapped to a wall. Show me how you make a sandwich."
I remember the video about wringing out a washcloth. It sounds so simple.
Yes.
It sounds so boring on paper. Watch this guy wring out a wet rag. But in space, the physics are totally different, and it was captivating.
It was mesmerizing. He soaks the cloth and twists it. On Earth, the water would just drip onto the floor. In space, the water behaves like a gel because of surface tension. It sticks to the cloth, and then it crawls up his hands, covering them like a liquid glove.
And he's trying to shake it off, and it just won't go anywhere.
It was a brilliant, simple science lesson disguised as a fun clip. Or the video about how to click your fingernails without the clippings flying into the equipment and shorting out the entire space station.
You don't think about that stuff.
He demystified the experience. He made the ISS feel like a place where people lived and worked, not just a sterile laboratory in the sky. Forbes called him perhaps the most social media savvy astronaut ever to leave Earth. And they were right.
And he engaged with pop culture, too. He did a Reddit AMA and Ask Me Anything that became one of the top threads of all time. He tweeted with William Shatner.
Captain Kirk and the real-life commander.
Is perfect.
It connected the sci-fi dream that inspired him with the scientific reality he was living, and then, of course, there was the music.
The music. He brought a Canadian-made guitar, a Lerve Parlor guitar, up to the station. And on Christmas Eve, 2012, he released Jewel in the Night, which was the first original song ever recorded in space.
But let's talk about the mechanics of that for a second, because playing a guitar in space isn't just about bringing the instrument up there. It's physically very difficult.
That's part of it. That's part of it, but your body changes too.
Yeah.
Without gravity pulling everything down, your fluids shift upward into your chest and head. It's called the fluid shift. It's why astronauts' faces look puffy in orbit.
Okay.
And it makes your sinuses completely congested. So his voice sounded different, more nasal than it does on Earth. He had to learn to sing with that new physiology.
And just physically playing the chords.
Imagine trying to play guitar while someone is gently pushing the neck of the guitar away from you constantly. Every time he moved his left hand to change a chord, the guitar would want to spin in the opposite direction due to Newton's third law. He had to learn to wedge it against the wall or trap it with his body just to get through a song, which makes the final performance even more impressive. We have to talk about Space Oddity.
His cover of the David Bowie classic, released just a few days before he was scheduled to return to Earth.
The production value was surprisingly high. It wasn't just a shaky webcam video. It was edited. It had panning shots of him floating through the station. It was cinematic.
It was a beautiful piece of art, a tribute, but it also, fascinatingly, sparked a legal rabbit hole. The Economist actually wrote a whole analysis on it.
Wait, legal issues? Over a cover song from space?
Think about it. Copyright laws are territorial. They apply to a specific country. If you perform a song in the United States, U.S. laws apply. If you do it in Germany, German laws apply.
Okay.
But the ISS is a multinational patchwork. So if Chris, a Canadian citizen, is floating in a module built by the Japanese, playing a song written by a Brit, recorded and uploaded to servers in the U.S., whose copyright laws apply.
I have no idea. My head hurts just thinking about it.
So did the lawyers. It took months of negotiation between space agencies and Bowie's publisher just to get permission to post that video and keep it on YouTube. It forced the legal world to actually start defining how intellectual property works in low Earth orbit.
Wow. We could do a whole deep dive just on that. Law and Order, low Earth orbit.
We really could.
But legal headaches aside, the emotional impact of that video was just immense. It was a goodbye letter to the station, and it was a gift to all of us on Earth.
It was. And when he landed, wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey under his spacesuit, by the way, just to keep it quintessentially Canadian, he wasn't just an astronaut anymore, he was a global superstar.
So he lands. It's May 2013. He's at the absolute peak of his fame. And almost immediately, he announces his retirement. July 2013. That seemed abrupt to some people. Why walk away when you're the most famous astronaut since Armstrong?
It goes back to the strategic planning we talked about at the beginning, but also it goes back to the human element. He had been chasing this dream for decades, living in the US and Russia, away from his extended family in Canada. He had made a promise to his wife, Helene, nearly 30 years prior.
A promise.
He promised that eventually, after the space career was done, they would move back home to Canada for good.
I love that. It's so grounding. Even commanders of the International Space Station have to balance work and life and keep their promises to their spouses.
He kept his word. But retirement for Chris Hadfield doesn't mean sitting on the porch watching the grass grow. He's not that kind of person.
Not at all. He pivoted seamlessly into being an educator and an author. We mentioned An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, which was a New York Times bestseller, a fantastic read. But he also started writing fiction.
The Apollo Murders trilogy, Cold War thrillers set during the space race.
And this is so interesting. He writes fiction to use his technical knowledge in a way that nonfiction doesn't always allow. He can describe the visceral feeling of a rocket launch or the technical specs of a Soviet weapon system and weave it into a gripping plot.
It's fiction, but the details are grounded in a reality he knows better than almost anyone on the planet.
And he became a professor at the University of Waterloo, teaching aviation and doing research on astronaut health. He hosted a master class on space exploration. He hosted a BBC show called Astronauts. Do you have what it takes?
He's effectively downloading his brain for the next generation, and he's still deeply involved in the industry. In 2021, he joined the Space Advisory Board for Virgin Galactic.
Right.
He's advising on how to open space to the public space tourism, suborbital flights. He's helping shape the next chapter.
Which is a whole new frontier, and the honors just kept rolling in. He's an officer of the Order of Canada, the Order of Ontario. He has the NASA Exceptional Service Medal. There's an airport named after him in his hometown of Sarnia, an asteroid 14143 Hadfield.
And my personal favorite tribute, the most unique one, Andrina Hadfieldi.
That sounds buzzy.
It's a species of bee named after him in 2020. You know you've truly made it when the biologists are naming insects after you.
A bee, a coin, an airport, and an asteroid. That's the trifecta.
But look, if we zoom out and try to synthesize this entire career, we've talked about the fighter pilot, the test pilot, the blinder-than-blind spacewalker, and the singing sensation. What does the arc of Chris Hadfield's life actually tell us?
It tells me that the definition of the right stuff has changed. It's evolved.
Exactly. In the 1960s, the right stuff was competence, courage, and maybe most importantly, silence. You did the job, you didn't talk about your feelings, and you definitely didn't sing about it. You were a steely-eyed missile man.
Right. The strong, silent type.
Hadfield proved that you can have all that elite competence, the test pilot skills, the engineering degree, the ability to survive a crisis with ice in your veins, but you can combine it with empathy, with creativity, and with communication. He added a new dimension.
He showed that exploration isn't just about going somewhere. It's about bringing the rest of us along for the ride. Because if you go to space and you can't tell anyone what it felt like, what it looked like, what it meant, what was the point?
And that is absolutely crucial for the future of space exploration. As we look at missions to Mars, which will be long, isolating, and incredibly expensive, public support is going to matter more than ever. We need astronauts who can explain why we are doing this, not just how.
Speaking of Mars, that leads us to a bit of a provocative thought to end on. Hadfield has said on record, more than once, that he would take a one-way trip to Mars. If the opportunity arose, he'd do it.
It's the explorer in him. He knows the risks, and he accepts them.
Right.
It's what he's trained for his whole life.
But here's the question for you listening. As commercial spaceflight becomes a reality with companies like Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, and as we genuinely start planning for human missions to the Red Planet, what kind of astronaut do we need? Do we need the silent, stoic technicians of the 60s who just get the job done with maximum efficiency? Or does the long-term survival of our entire space program depend on finding more Hadfields, people who can turn the vacuum of space into a stage and inspire a whole new generation to care?
It's a great question, because if a tree falls on Mars and no one tweets a cool video of it, did we really explore it?
Laughs. Exactly.
Yeah.
Something to think about next time you look up at the night sky.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the life of Colonel Chris Hadfield.
Keep looking up.
We'll see you next time.